Welcome into a football show. My name is Zach Lyons. You can follow me on X at AfterwardsPod. That's Stoney Keeley. You can follow him on X at Stoney Keeley. It's no Braden today. He's missing the entire free agency week because he is on vacation. A forced, I don't know what a forced family vacation really entails, but the fact that he was forced to do anything against his will is very unlike Braden. So it's very interesting to see the home dynamics on that one.
Yeah, are they okay? Like, do we know this is not a hostage situation or anything?
Maybe they're to the Willy Wonka experiment up in Experience that was over in Germany or wherever it was at.
Yeah,
and Braden's going to end up Kate Middleton. We're all just going to see AI Braden floating around. We're going to have to ask for pictures for Braden himself. But free agency has begun. And before we get into all the free agency talk, because there's so much to get into, it's been a very good start to free agency if you're a Tennessee Titans fan. But Bluegrass, but Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, award-winning. They are the Ric Flair of liquor store awards. They have tons of awards. They have everything that you need. They're on Uber Eats, so they'll drive so you can drink. So make sure to go to Sinkers Beverages and join the in crowd to get the information that you need to be able to join our live draft show, which is going to be bigger and better than ever before. And we've only had one ever before, so it's bigger and better than round one.
I also if I may, like, you guys haven't even asked me if I'm available to be a part of it. Y'all are just telling people on the show like Stoney's going to be there.
Yeah, well,
I act like I'm not going to be there, but I'm going to be there.
Yeah, I'm also not in charge of that, so that is any invitations that are supposed to go out for people that are participating as far as emceeing or being on anything. That's up to Braden. I'm not in charge of that. I'm just there. I'm a pretty face. I'm just the talent.
I'll wear my best tuxedo.
Yeah. We have also the Kingston Group. BuildKG.com for all your home remodeling needs. Call them. Just give them a call. Let them walk you through the entire process. Everything that you may need over at BuildKG.com. The Kingston Group, great sponsor, our longtime and first sponsor for a football show. Sorry, he's got a lot going on, so I'm trying my best to try to focus. Got to focus because I'm not used to hosting this particular show in the middle of the day, so it's a little bit more difficult. But we have some signings to talk about. Tony Pollard, though Lloyd Cushenberry hasn't been finalized unless something popped up while we were on doing the intros, has not technically been finalized. There's a couple of people saying it will happen. It's in the process of happening. But we kind of have to, wait and see until we get results. But it's looking like it's trending in the right direction that Lloyd Cushenberry will be a Tennessee Titan. Tony Pollard has officially signed, which is great to me. Yes, Logan, I know none of these deals are #final or quotation finalized, but it hasn't been officially announced with a fancy graphic that he has signed with agreed to terms with the Tennessee Titans. I like that. Did you see last night that someone jumped in Jason OTC's mentions and Jason of Over the Cap, who started Over the Cap and quoted and replied with a piece
with
from
his
the
own
article that he wrote? That's kind of how I felt about that comment just now. But either way, we haven't seen the fancy graphic from Lloyd Cushenberry from any of the people that would normally tweet that out. No Jordan Schultz or anything like that. But a lot has gone down. So Tony Pollard is a Tennessee Titan. And boy, oh boy, I could not find my Memphis hat. I think it's in my golf bag, but I didn't have time to go get it. But if I could find my Memphis hat, I would have been wearing it today. I've been on the Tony Pollard train since he was a draft prospect, obviously because he was a running back at University of Memphis. He's really good. Last year, when we were talking about Tyjae Spears, pro comp Tony Pollard.
I'm right there with you.
I've said all offseason long that the Tennessee Titans don't need a compliment. The Tennessee Titans need someone that is essentially Tyjae Spears that could do all three phases of the game. They got it. So to me, it's like I don't even care about the carries, the carries. I don't care about the how they rotate them. I think the way that you look at Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet is the perfect example of what I use. We talked about that last year when he went to Seattle or was drafted by Seattle, Zach Charbonnet. So I don't care because guess what? They're both home run hitters and they both provide you the flexibility on offense from a schematic standpoint that you are not tipping your hand.
That's the key.
Tennessee Titans are gone. Stoney, what were your initial reactions?
I was pumped. I mean, I was stoked. I mean, these two signings in conjunction had me feeling like I was struck by a bolt of lightning, but instead of killing me, it gave me superpowers. So now, I tweeted I could go out and run a 4.5 40 right now. I'm just stoked out of my mind. But specifically with Tony Pollard, I agree, man. Like, I don't think they have to necessarily go get the thumper and the big bodied short yardage running back or anything like that. Just get dudes who can make plays. That's what this offense needs right now. Go get a dude that can make plays. Tony Pollard can break a tackle. He can spring a long run. He plays a lot like Tyjae Spears. I think that was a very accurate comp on him, on Spears coming out of college was Tony Pollard. Now they're in the same backfield together. And you hit the nail on the head. I think the biggest part is that the Titans aren't going to be tipping their hand based on who the running back is when they're running plays out there. So I was all for it. I honestly don't even care about the money. I mean, at this point, just add playmakers to this roster where you can get them. And I honestly, I still don't think that they're done at the running back position. So the people that are saying, oh, they need to get a power back at this point. Like, I have been preaching for weeks now. This is a really, really deep running back class with rotational guys that can come in and play in the NFL. It's like 20 deep with dudes that are going to be day 3 picks or undrafted free agents. So there's still room for them to add to this running back room. Tony Pollard is a spark plug. Tyjae Spears is a spark plug, and this offense needs spark plugs. So I'm all for it.
Well, if you there was a tweet out earlier a couple weeks ago, and I look at it and the tweet was Tyjae Spears was one of the most effective short yardage backs in like third and short, fourth and short. He was one of the most effective backs because you don't have to run up the middle on third and fourth. Think of how many times we have think of how many times as a fan, you not just the Titans, but any football game, and you're like, why in the world would you run up the middle in that situation when a sweep or a toss to the other side usually has a high success rate on these conversions, stuff like why do you force it up the middle when everybody knows you're going up the middle? And now you don't have to go up the middle. You can go up the middle. Tyjae Spears can go up the middle. There's nothing preventing him from it. Tony Pollard has shown that he can go up the middle as well in these short yardage situations. You're looking at the Joe Mixon, Chase Brown kind of running back duo, which we talked about again all off season. We talked about it's better to have those two guys. If you need a fat guy to run between the tackles because you're an old school 1990s, football fan, listen, they could just sign Julius Chestnut when he becomes an unrestricted free agent, right? Like, to me, it's just like, yes, they're likely to draft a guy in the 7th round, but now you've freed yourself up in the 4th, 5th, and 6th round to not have to take a running back.
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, look, this is said partly tongue-in-cheek, but if you need a yard, put Big Jeff out there. They did it last year. They put him out there at fullback and were throwing him passes or had him clearing the way for whoever was in front or just handing the ball off. Like, you can get creative to solve that particular problem. What, Jeffrey Simmons at fullback doesn't do for you is probably spring the 60-yard touchdown run.
Yeah, right. I mean, like, a couple of signings that have happened before we continue to talk about Tony Pollard. Bryce Huff has signed one of the highest paid non-quarterback undrafted free agents contract signings. So that's a lot. Basically, he's the highest paid undrafted free agent that's not a quarterback in history. A 3-year, $51.1 million deal with the Philadelphia Eagles, who were rumored to be wanting to trade both, or who gave permission for Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick to trade. Jonah Jackson to the Rams, which has already been mentioned in the chat, but we mentioned it off air. Mm-hmm. Josh Jacobs to Green Bay.
That's pretty wild.
That is kind of crazy, and I don't think Aaron Jones is a free agent. I'd have to double check. So, because I thought just AJ Dillon was. And then a weird signing, where is it? Oh, a 3-year, $22.5 million deal for Colby Parkinson, the tight end of the Seahawks, going to the
Dang.
Rams. That is a odd. That's one of those odd ones that you're like, what? Like, did you really have to pay? Was the market for Colby Parkinson
Yeah.
that hot to get that one?
I mean, get your
But
bag, young
speaking of
man. But
markets and speaking of contracts, Tony Pollard, right? We don't know the full details of the quarter or the contract. Listen, it was first reported that Gabe Davis got a 3-year, $50 million deal. Well, it turns out it was a 3-year, $39 million deal with a chance to earn $50 million if a couple things happen. We don't know what those things are.
which,
So
if I
there's a good
may, real
chance.
quick,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is an opportunity to remind people to sign up for Stacking the Inbox,
Yes.
where you are on top of this information like nobody else in this market, like nobody else in the game, as far as I'm concerned. I need nobody else.
appreciate it.
I have my Stacking the Inbox membership. I have this information, this tool that he's created handy. Just don't trust anybody else. Just come to us.
I love it. I love it. Only come to stackinginbox.com. Don't worry about these other so-called salary cap. The
No,
people
no.
that I am very flattered that other outlets have had to find 2 people to do the work of one. So I'm
Yeah.
very flattered about that. But at the end of the day, we don't know if the deal really is a $24 million base guarantee. Like, we don't know if that is the total compensation base. It could be a 3-year, $20 million deal with a chance for it to turn in $24 million. We don't know what the signing bonus is, what the guaranteed money is up front. So really, we don't even know when the out is. If I had to guess, I would say after 2 years. But at the end of the day, the Tennessee Titans have now done something that is beneficial to them in that they have set, with Chicago, have set the running back market. It is like when the Jacksonville Jaguars signed Christian Kirk to $18 million a year a couple of years ago, and that set off this chain reaction. With all these high-priced free agents that are at running back, specifically Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, that right there is letting you know that those guys are going to get paid more. In fact, Saquon Barkley has already been told, it's been leaked that Saquon Barkley's offer from the Texans is around $11 million a year.
Whew.
With the Philadelphia Eagles, they're north of $12 million a year. And they've had to go up to that number because the running back market, which apparently I kind of brushed to the side as like just running back agents saying, shit to all these media people,
Sure.
that this running back market was going to rebound. And apparently it has. What are your thoughts on the Tony Pollard contract? How fans should view the Tony Pollard contract?
Well, I mean, I first of all would say props to Rand Carthon for getting this done so quickly before more of these deals started coming out. And I mean, I don't know for sure that it would have had an impact on the contract itself, but you figure if more running backs are being paid more money, it stands to reason that Tony Pollard's agent would be like, hey, hold on a second, maybe we should ask for a little bit more. So I would commend where we sit now. I would commend Rand Carthon on getting the deal done quickly. We assume, it was only like 13 minutes between the time they were allowed to talk and they get the deal done. But I kind of from the contract approach, I don't want to beat anybody up. I don't want to be too hard on people, but this stuff is so confusing. And I'm speaking as a layperson myself, that this stuff is, I read your work and I admit that I have to read it like over and over to kind of grasp and understand what it actually means for the Tennessee Titans and their cap space. And so I would caution people to not just so, brazenly put it out there. Oh, for this money, it's ridiculous. It's too expensive. Why would you? What a waste of money. Tony Pollard's busted. He can't be the running back one and all that stuff. I would caution yourself to just be patient to see when the final numbers actually come out. And I would say maybe learn a little bit more about the salary cap, because the more I learn about it, the less concerned I am with that side of the free agency.
I look at it from this standpoint in the fact that I've seen like there's no way that the Titans should pay this much money to a running back.
Right.
Okay. Well, in the big scheme of things, we even forgot about Hassan Haskins. I just saw it pop up in the chat.
I was going to ask
He could
about
be
him.
he could be your slow moving running back thumper in between the tackles that gets tackled for a loss. I look at it and I go, I see people say this stuff about, well, you shouldn't put this much money in it. Well, what percent of the cap is this going to be? What percent of your cash is going to the running backs? Not a lot. When you start looking at it, and probably I would say that if you look at it over at for what Lloyd Cushenberry may be, it's probably going to be a lot of money. If you look at what the guards have made, and yes, I know he's a center, but he's the top of the market center. He was the top of the market center when Mitch Morse was still there, when Andre James was still there. He was the guy, one of the top free agents, not only the top free agent position at his position, but he's one of the top free agents at any position. He's 26, and he's supposedly coming to work with Bill Callahan, which hashtag All Pro Cush is what will the hashtag we'll be using to get his All Pro status for this year in year one.
There we go.
Hashtag All Pro Cush. But at the end of the day, you can't say I don't like it when people just look at the contract. They see 3-year 24 and they think, well, it must be an $8 million cap hit, or it must be $8 million per year, or I can't believe they're going to pay $24 million over 3 years. I can't believe that they're going to spend that much money on the running back. It's all about seeing what the positional breakdown is as a group, because you have a really cheap running back right now. So now Tyjae Spears, now Tony Pollard, their contracts end at the same time. So you have for 3 years, technically, if he were to see it all throughout the entirety of the contract for Tony Pollard, 3 years of two really good players. And I want to talk a little bit about Tony Pollard in the sense that after the halfway point of this season, his yards per carry went back up because he was further removed from a leg injury back that he suffered in January 2023. And so he had also the tightrope walk surgery shortly after that injury. And so he came back and became the full-time running back. And now he did really admirable for a full-time running back coming back from an injury like he had. He still got over 1,000 yards. He still had some good breakaways. He still had a good broken tackle percentage and rate and all this kind of stuff. So to me, now he's a year removed from that surgery. He went through, he played all the games, got all the carries. He should be even better than last year. And now he can go back to where he thrived in the sense of a timeshare split backfield, 80 whatever split you want to call it. And that's I think it's a really good thing to have.
I would agree as well. And I that was the exact question I was going to ask you next, is about how they deploy him, his utility within this offense, because I don't feel like I don't know. It blows my mind sometimes people say that they watched the Titans in 2023 and don't think this is Tyjae Spears' backfield in 2024. But to me, Tony Pollard was not signed to be running back one. Tony Pollard was signed to be a complementary piece to Tyjae Spears, who is coming into his own in his own right. And I think that is the role that you're most likely to get spark plug Tony Pollard out of, to come in relief, or in particular situations where the offense doesn't have to change up what it's doing when you take Tyjae Spears off the field. Now, I will say, Zach, how concerned are you that they've added a running back with a broken leg to a backfield with a running back that has no knees?
Yeah, it's very concerning. I don't know. I guess wheelchairs will be allowed on the on the field, so they're going to have really strong arms from having to use those wheelchairs all across. The kicker news: Jaguars are signing former Broncos kicker Will Lutz. Sources say he gets a 3-year deal. This is after Greg Zuerlein's already signed. This is after Chase McLaughlin signed, I think is the other kicker I'm thinking of. But the Tennessee Titans supposedly have let Nick Folk go out and test the market. Now, you can look at this in 3 different ways. That they're expecting Nick Folk not to have a market, and they'll be able to re-sign him. So it's kind of a fiscally sound move on them.
Maybe good faith. Let him see if he can get paid.
Step 2, that they're looking for they're looking towards the future at kicker, and they feel that they are going to be able to find the kicker of the future that will be your solution for the next 5 to 6 years instead of just the next 1 or 2 with Nick Folk, or 3, that they are making the same damn dumb moves that they have made over and over at the kicking position.
Yeah.
Where do you fall under those 3?
I am scared to death that they are neglecting the kicker position once again. And I mean, there are some decent names in the free agent market. We're seeing them start
Hey,
to be
you score touchdowns, you don't need a kicker.
well, touche. Hey, maybe that's the philosophy here. Can Big Jeff kick a field goal too? I don't know. I'm all
Yeah.
over his utility today for some reason, but I worry about it because you finally, after years of searching, you finally found a proven commodity, and now your inclination is to let the guy go. This is a roster, Zach. I don't need to tell you this, but this is a kicker at 7. I love that, Logan. This is a roster that has virtually no locks right now. No like foundational pieces. You had a kicker, you had a punter. Don't fuck with that. Don't mess it up. If you can keep the guy, you keep the guy. I mean, you look across this roster and they're not worried about quarterback. They've got their left guard, they've got their slot corner, their running back, maybe a couple of other positions, but like this roster needs a major overhaul. And to me, you had the chance to let Nick Folk or keep Nick Folk. Don't let him hit the free agent market. Just pay the man what he wants, what he's worth. And the fact that they're not doing that, I'm not pressing the panic button over a kicker, but recent history has given me PTSD a little bit, that I am a little triggered that they think we'll just bring in a couple of undrafted guys and sort itself out in camp, because it hasn't really worked out for him so far.
Well, looking at, and I'm kind of surprised, did Cameron Dicker not get a new contract or something?
I have no idea. I haven't seen his name pop up.
Oh,
Fat
they
Randy
did
is still out there.
They did tender him. That just wasn't updated in my thing. So give me 1 second. I'm updating as we're on the show.
Live TV, pal.
Live TV, the Titans off-season tool for the stackinginbox.com paid subscribers and paulkarski.com paid subscribers. And I'm looking at some of the kickers that are left out there. You have Greg Joseph. You have, which is all right. Mason
Reunion
Crosby,
tour.
he's kind of old. Michael Badgley, Nick Folk, obviously. Randy Bullock, Rodrigo Blankenship, Trey Wolf, Zane Gonzalez. Obviously, Nick Folk is the best one, and there is obviously going to be other teams that still need a kicker. So it comes down to just how much money they think he's going to get paid. And right now, kickers are getting paid about $4 to $5 million a year. At the for Square Up, I started a post or a thread on the message boards where you can get the link for the free agent tool for stackinginbox.com subscribers. So I feel like they're just playing with fire with it, in my opinion.
Love it.
And I don't love it. It doesn't mean that it's going to completely backfire, but there is a good chance based on that. I mean, listen, we saw San Francisco draft Jake Moody in the 4th round last year. The Tennessee Titans have 3 7th-round picks. Doesn't hurt to stand to reason that if they fill other needs in free agency, like they did with the running back, that they may turn around and just use one of those on a kicker, which is proven to be a good use of a 7th-round pick.
Yeah, have you done much work on this kicker class?
I have not. Have you?
No, I haven't. Aside from watching Tory Taylor punt balls to the moon at the Senior Bowl, that's the extent of my special teams legwork done for this draft class. But I'm with you, and I am usually a guy that preaches just because it happened in the past does not mean that it's going to happen in the future. But I just can't get it out of my head. It's like battered Titan fan syndrome here. It's like this hubris with the kicker position. We change regimes. There's a new staff in place, and it still feels like that's what's happening right now. And I don't love it. Yeah, QC Hawk, I'm with you. Tory Taylor at 7.
And someone's like Cade York. I mean, we had Cade York in the building already. He didn't do anything.
Right.
He's over at the Giants. I'm good on Cade York. I'm good on retreads. The only retread I want is Nick Folk. Don't bring me someone that we've already seen the Tennessee Titans cut. It doesn't really do it for me.
I'm with you.
So I look at it this way. We talked about Tony Pollard, and someone asked, is he a good fit for the zone scheme? Yes, absolutely. 100% is a fit for the zone scheme. So I'm good there. But I'm not entirely sure anymore after doing some further research that this is going to be a zone scheme.
Yeah.
So that is the big question mark hanging in the air, right? Listen,
Sure.
Tyjae Spears, Tony Pollard have dating back to college, have done really well in zone schemes. They fit really well in a zone scheme. That's what they pretty much have done their careers now. But there are rumors that the team is heavily interested in Michael. Oh, okay.
On
Where's
when
that?
you.
On when you.
On when you. On when you?
On when you.
Okay.
So they shown interest in him. Now, he fits in a zone scheme, and that has been my big contention, is that, well, obviously they're going to be a zone scheme, but he fits at right guard in that. But now people seem to think, and I guess Kirk to Atlanta just became official, which has been pretty much the rumor the whole time. So
yeah.
yeah,
And good for both parties. I personally think that's
agree.
a pretty good fit for Kirk.
But I look at it and I go, okay. And I did the research to make sure that Mike was actually right, not just shooting from the hip. The Bengals ran the most gap last year. The Browns were 7th last year in runs that were gap. So it stands to reason that maybe they're waiting to see how the offensive line finishes.
Sure.
Maybe Cushenberry, better at zone, has done zone more in the NFL. So now I'm thinking, okay, well, if they sign him, are they still going to go gap, or are they going to go Cushenberry, then win you at guard? But if the Tennessee Titans do decide to change their whole blocking scheme to a gap scheme, where are you at on how does that leave the guys like NPF, Dylan Radins, Jalen Duncan, and to a lesser extent, Andre Dillard, who's on this team and has to be discussed until he's not? And does it help Peter Skoronski more than to be in a gap scheme because it's less reliant on power and more on technique and trajectory? Like you go into the side of the you're trying to get the guy out of the play, not necessarily out of the gap, not necessarily use power.
Yeah, I think so there are two thoughts here from a high level overview. I think you're spot on. It's the exact thing I was going to say, is like you kind of, I think philosophically speaking, probably a good idea to wait and see how the roster fills out and see what type of offensive
just real
line.
quick.
Let's get it.
Because it's something that we need to that's involved. No, it's not breaking news, but it's something that's involved in the discussion. Skoronski at Northwestern played predominantly in a gap scheme.
Yeah.
So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah. So I think for one, I think it is important that they do kind of see how the offensive line room fills out before ultimately deciding. Two, I think what we've learned about Brian Callahan throughout the course of this process is that he wants to be multiple. So I know there are a lot of teams that come from this, like McVay, Shanahan tree. Those guys kind of mix things up quite a bit between zone and power, zone and gap. And I kind of feel like the potential is there based on how the personnel dominoes fall, that we're not going to abandon zone altogether, but it's about the versatility and being able to do more things with the 5 guys that you have. And so I think just because this nugget is out there, I don't know that I would necessarily bite on it, meaning, oh, the Titans are going to shift to gap only scheme. I think it's just kind of like, hey, we need to do probably a little bit more of this, because last offseason, like you and I talked about quite a bit, like the trend with all these athletic pass blocking offensive linemen kind of felt like the Titans wanted to go almost like exclusively zone. And the result was, I feel like they got a lot of offensive linemen that weren't overly powerful. specifically thinking, like, I'm having flashbacks of Aaron Brewer getting blown up on every other play. So I think it's a good thing. And I think it's probably a wise practice to implement some more of that into this offense because, like we've talked about with the running back position, the addition of Tony Pollard, the more ways they have to hurt you, the more ways they have to punish you, ultimately mean the more ways they have to win games. So from a personnel standpoint, I think having Skoronski's experience running gap power stuff, I think it's good for him. I think the type of go ahead, sorry.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I look at it from a standpoint of just because a team runs a lot of gap doesn't mean that they run like 90% of gap. It's like
Fair enough.
maybe 56%,
Yeah.
52%
Okay.
could get you in the lead for gap runs. So I just want to throw
Gotcha.
that out there. It's like you talk about being multiple, and that felt like it was a very appropriate inclusion in that fact that it could be 52% is gap and 48% is zone, which
Yeah.
is fine. I mean, but that seems to be how most offenses work.
Yeah. So I think getting guys that can thrive in both is probably a priority, and you're looking at it with like Lloyd Cushenberry is a guy that is pretty good at both, and I think Skoronski can be good at both. I don't know what they're going to do at left tackle. I don't know, if it's going to be a free agent or if they are going to go Joe Alt, but you pointed it out earlier. Joe Alt played a lot of gap at Notre Dame. I think he would be a better fit for this. Mike Onwenu, if he comes here, I don't know what their vision would be, if they think he's a right tackle, if he's going to be a guard. I have my own thoughts about Onwenu, but I mean, it does kind of feel like this is a way of, I think adding bodies that can do both definitely bolsters the effort to become a little more scheme versatile.
When you talk about Skoronski, so we got let's theoretically put Skoronski, Cushenberry. Okay, so there's two spots.
Yeah,
Daniel Brunskill for again until he is actually off the team or cut or anything. He is on the team, and he would be your right guard in this scenario.
presumably. Yeah,
You look at Michael Nwinwu, I always add that extra W over at right tackle. That
yeah.
leaves a pretty gaping hole still at left tackle. Yes, you can keep Andre Dillard as like trying to hide your intentions at 7. But if this free agency class, I want to pose this to you. Okay, they don't sign a left tackle. They do sign Calvin Ridley. They sign Mike Onwenu. Isn't that just signaling to the entire league you're taking a left tackle in the draft?
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. And I don't know. I mean, at that point, like if your intentions are that clear, I don't know, you kind of do you feel like they would have to be okay with multiple guys or just whoever is there for them to pick? Because to me, that signifies to like the New York Jets who might need a left tackle. Hey, we got to get up before Tennessee if we want Joe Alt. And so the Titans would then, in that scenario, just be comfortable with Alt or Olu, or maybe they think Talisi Fuaga can move over to the left side. JC Latham can kick over. Like they're just going with the approach that, hey, whoever is there at 7, or if we can trade down, like whatever, we can make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
I mean, that's what I think the approach needs to be. If this is how free agency ends up going, which we know that they have been linked supposedly to Mekhi Becton, but that
Yeah.
seems to be more of Becton's side, is how it kind of reads to me. And we haven't heard anything about the Tennessee Titans and Mekhi Becton, so
I like
I wonder
Becton, by
what's
the
going on
way.
there.
I think
And
people are
yeah,
overthinking Becton.
yeah.
He's
Well,
he's
he's
gonna be
lost
cheap.
a lot of pounds. The whole injury thing is very interesting because what you read, but what happened in New York was that the Jets totally mishandled that whole situation. They thought that he could rehab it. They advised, their medical team advised that he rehab it instead of actually getting it fixed. So when that caused further problems, and they eventually got taken care of. So that cost them about a year and a half of seasons for Mekhi Becton. But he came back. He lost a lot of weight. He was down to 342, and he's with one of the worst offensive line coaches in the
Yeah.
NFL, the most hated guys. And it was just a terrible, when your quarterback sucks, it's kind of like people could just tee off on you. When you don't have any real threats anywhere besides Garrett Wilson, they could just kind of tee off on you. I think we would have seen a different season had Aaron Rodgers been behind center instead of, Mekhi Becton. So we'll see. I feel like right now that people are just going to, I keep saying it, I think people just going to have to keep saying that if they sign Mike Onwenu and they don't cut Daniel Brunskill, then that means that I think we're leaning towards gap. Now, if they cut Daniel Brunskill shortly after signing Mike Onwenu, then maybe there's a chance that they still go zone with Cushenberry, Onwenu, and Skoronski in the center, which is a formidable interior offensive line, regardless.
Yeah. The thing about Onwenu that scares me, I watched a little bit of his tape over the weekend to kind of prep for this show, but I don't know if I'm just not seeing it. Maybe he's one of those guys that is just so like burly and thick that he doesn't look as fast as he really is. But I just felt like he really struggled with like the quick twitchy edge rushers around the edge where it just kind of looked a little bit slow and a little late to react. I didn't feel like he set deep enough in his pass sets, and the result was that guys would take the edge on him and he'd just turn his hips and chase. And, there are times like he's got really strong hands, like he could just push a guy and he'd be on the ground. And that was really cool to watch. I think he's got a really good jump set, foot drive, that sort of stuff as a run blocker. But I think playing at the edge in the NFL requires you to have a little more athleticism and speed from that position than I think he necessarily showed on tape. And that's why I kind of thought, hey, if they beef up the interior and they put him at right guard and they want to run more gap and they just want to like steamroll people, I'm cool with that. But if your plan is to put him at right tackle and have him play on the edge, that's where I have to like give up, throw my hands up a little bit and just say, hey, y'all see vision that I don't see right now. So good luck to you.
Yeah. Speaking of that and vision stuff, with all this information that keeps coming up and things will change, draft strategies change. To a guy that we both have been kind of down on through the pre-draft process, has been Xavier Legette. And this week, sure, I promise that I am watching more Xavier Legette film than I ever have leading up to this, but because I've only done 2, I'm adding 3 more games to the repertoire. Repertoire? I can't say that word.
Repertoire.
Yeah, there we go. I'm adding 3 more games because I came across a thread from Brett Coleman about the personal history of Xavier Legette dating back from high school and why he may be perceived as a one-year wonder when in reality it was that stuff out of his control that happened. It's a great thread. Just go to Brett Coleman and search his tweets for Legette. There you go. I look at it and he was so athletic. He is big. He did make a few wow catches at the Senior Bowl. So I want to be open to the idea that Xavier Legette at 38 is a possibility.
Okay.
But it's one of those things. This is why I like to use the combine for. Why like to use keep an open mind, keeping an open mind on guys like Xavier Legette, even in free agency like Calvin Ridley. You get new information.
Sure.
So this week, at some point I'm going to plant my flag in one way or the other on Xavier Legette.
I think I just got some new South Carolina all 22. And if that's the case, I'll hit you up after we're done recording. But I'll dig into it too this week. I'll make a note to get up to speed on Xavier Legette because he's a weird prospect, man. And I don't mean it like the vibes are off or anything, but it just seems like there's so much stuff going on around him, even at the Senior Bowl, where he would flash these plays where he could like climb the ladder and go up and high point the ball over talented defensive backs that were there in Mobile that week. Like you see those moments where you're just like, holy shit, this dude is AJ Brown. But then he disappeared for an entire practice. And then later on in the week, we found out, oh, well, he might have kind of sort of been dealing with some sort of injury. But the body language was weird too. because we'd see him come off the field defeated, his head hanging a little bit. Michael Pratt, the quarterback from Tulane, had to come over and kind of give him a little pep talk and get him juiced up for the next rep. It's kind of like, what's going on here? What are the answers to these questions that we have about Xavier Legette? And then the tape is weird too. Watching the Clemson game, I felt like there were plays that Nate Wiggins pretty well shut him down. But then there were also plays that he would just get completely wide ass open, nobody around him, and they just didn't throw the ball to him. So I'm like, what is this offense he's even playing in right now? It's just a weird process.
I wanted to use that as jumping off point to first off talk about how viewpoints can change or soften over time.
Sure.
And today at stackinginbox.com, I dive deep into some stats and some wide receiver value. You know, what's the best way to build and find your wide receivers? What's the most cost effective and stuff like that. And I've softened my stance on Calvin Ridley with them. He has a really high success rate against zone, really high success rate against man. I mean, we're talking like 70 and 80th percentile league wide. He has elite success rates in all of his routes except for the curl route, which is fine. But I mean, when you have like 14 or 15 routes, but they had static alignment with him. They only lined him up in like one area of the field for most of the time. They didn't really utilize his route tree well enough. And so I kind of softened my stance. And now these wide receiver contracts that we talked about, Mike Evans, Gabe Davis, and potentially Michael Pittman, I'm like, okay, well, maybe Calvin Ridley is going to be a lot cheaper than we all thought. And if that's the case, I'm okay with signing Calvin Ridley at a certain breaking point.
Sure.
Because he has had elite seasons in terms of EPA. He could help this team, and it likely would be a 3 or 4 year deal with an out after 2, more than likely. But there's a lot of concern with Ridley in the sense of what all went down with Jacksonville, but I'm kind of getting the sense that maybe they're scapegoating Calvin Ridley a little bit. And Saquon Barkley just got announced to Philly. Thanks for those in there.
Ooh, sorry for your loss, Sean. Big Texans fan, was hoping for Barkley there. Ooh,
yeah.
Tough scene.
We'll see where that ends up, but they are dedicated to running that football up there. And it says right here, Barkley to Philly, 3-year, $37.75 million.
Yeah, shout out Jake being on top of that.
Put him at $12.6 million a year, if that is all base salary guarantee, which I have not seen that on my end. I'm not disputing it. We got to be careful. It may not be all base salary. Antonio Gibson stays with the Commanders, which is a good move on his part. But where are you at on Calvin Ridley? Because I'm kind of in on Calvin Ridley up to a certain point in price, and I talked about that. Deadspin fires all of its riders. Deadspin shut down. There you go.
So much is happening.
A lot of those guys deserve to be fired. I usually don't say that very lightly, but there's a lot of people on Deadspin that deserve to be fired. Not everybody, but a lot of them. Sorry, Deadspin. Gibson to Patriots now. It's not to Commanders. Gibson to Patriots. So
is it
either way,
Gibson?
Let's just try to. I'm just trying to talk about Calvin Ridley. Let's chat settle down. We don't need every free agency signing just quite yet. We got to talk about the Titans. Calvin Ridley. So I've been pretty anti Calvin Ridley wide receiver 1 money, but I'm okay with the wide receiver 2 money for Calvin Ridley. That if he hits certain milestones, we'll pay him wide receiver 1-esque money. Where are you at on Calvin Ridley yourself before you saw the contracts that just popped up, or how were you feeling about Calvin Ridley?
You know, I was a little bit higher on Ridley than you were, I think, this whole time. I think he does provide a valuable skill set to this team. And again, I hark back to what I said about Tony Pollard. Like, this team just needs playmakers, and I think he can be a playmaker. Was kind of discouraged. There is something wonky about the way he was used in that Jacksonville offense. It was kind of like, I felt that there was a rigid sort of quality to how they deployed him, and he would still go out there and make plays. I mean, he fucking slaughtered the Titans in one of their games last year. So I still saw the flashes there. And I thought, you know what, if you're going to overpay a if you're going to overpay a wide receiver, if you're forced to do that, then at least Ridley is a guy that I think still has some upside depending on how you use him and his skill set within this offense. Now, seeing the contract values kind of come down for the wide receiver market is encouraging and kind of makes me feel a lot better about that as a potential signing. And ultimately, I think these signings that you're making now ultimately alleviate needs that you have to fill within the draft and require you to invest a draft pick in a certain position. I'm not saying that the Titans won't have to draft a wide receiver if they sign Calvin Ridley, but I think
Because they definitely will.
the more boxes you check in free agency allows you the flexibility to go more best player available throughout the draft. And that is ultimately the spot that you want to be in, where you're just stockpiling talent. So I think with what Calvin Ridley could bring to the table. And I don't think you would necessarily ask him to be wide receiver one. I think in conjunction with DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, draft picks, and then, you know, the might as well we got him situation with Traylon Burks and Kyle Phillips. I think you could put together a nice little patchwork wide receiver core. And also, that's not to mention how deep the wide receiver class is with day 3 and undrafted caliber guys that I think can contribute in the NFL. So I'm all for it. I would be cool with it. Lastly, I will say Deadspin told me I was not good enough to write for them, so rest in piss. Except for all the good writers that lost their jobs and all that. I feel sorry.
Sean Murphy-Bunting has been signed by the Arizona Cardinals, so he is off the board for the Tennessee Titans. When it was they were kind of thinking about bringing him back, according to reports this morning. So I kind of want to keep talking about Ridley, but talking about the potential in the sense of this, that also signing Ridley also helps soften the blow of if you were to trade back. Now, I think we both agree. I don't care if they sign Mekhi Becton. I don't care if they sign Calvin Ridley or both. You have to draft the left tackle, and you have to draft you need to draft your left tackle of the future and your wide receiver of the future.
Sure.
But you don't have to do it at 7.
Well, and I think that those signings would potentially, theoretically, based on the duration of the contract, would free them up to say, okay, maybe if that guy's not there at this point, maybe we just sit back and wait, and maybe even consider like, okay, maybe next year we can get that guy too.
Yes. But I also want to talk about this X I put out this morning, and it is from Adam PFN Insider Adam Kaplan, who says that obviously Titans would be fairly aggressive. I think Tony Pollard. I think some of these names will indicate that they're going to be fairly aggressive, which is what we've talked about, right? We've talked about that they would be fairly aggressive.
Sure.
Just smart. Maybe aggression would be intelligent aggression would be the right word to use. Their top target is Chidobe Awuzie.
Let's go.
That seems to be trending in the right direction from a few things that I've heard.
I love it.
CJ Gardner-Johnson is a guy that's on their radar, which would be to give you flexibility, but to give you a starter to pair with Amani Hooker. I know there are injury concerns, but you should not be concerned with the re-injury of a lacerated spleen. That doesn't seem to happen all the time. Yeah. Like, using that as a cause for injury concerns for a lacerated spleen, that's not a big thing that happens all the time.
Well, I've got a question for you about Gardner-Johnson while we're talking about him real quick, because I saw Paul Kaharski's tweet about it earlier today, talking about all the games that he's missed recently. And I know he's getting on up there in age as well. CJ Gardner-Johnson, not Paul. But I feel like this team doesn't just need talent on the field. Like, we keep talking about this roster from the perspective of, well, they just need playmakers. They just need talent. They have needs across the board. But I think there's also an element to rebuilding this roster that you kind of need a few dogs too. Like, you kind of need a few tone setters. And I feel like safety is one of the positions that they are good enough at with Amani Hooker and maybe Elijah Molden and maybe a late draft pick or an undrafted guy and maybe another veteran signing, that I think you can pay someone like CJ Gardner-Johnson, because He's still capable of good play, sure, in 2024, but he's also one of those guys that just has that idea, that mindset. That's the word I'm looking for. That mindset that Denard Wilson talks about wanting in his defensive backs. And I feel like he's a guy that maybe Amani Hooker, who was kind of asked to step up when Kevin Byard was traded, maybe he didn't necessarily fulfill that role the way that people expected him to. But with CJ Gardner-Johnson, you got a guy that can come in and maybe spread that mindset and make this secondary a bunch of dogs.
Well, and I think that, you know, being worried about some of that injury history is a little much. Like I said, the lacerated kidney or whatever he suffered, or spleen or whatever. Like, that's not going to happen, you know, all the time. And some of that stuff are injuries that are better suited for a defensive back to be able to take and rebound fairly quickly. That won't affect their game. So to me, that's kind of how I look at it. And I just got out of where I was going through the list, and I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the list if I can find it. Oh, here we go. Of course, they haven't ruled out re-signing Sean Murphy-Bunting, but that's door is shut. Keep an eye on Tony Pollard and Devin Singletary. Check Tony Pollard here.
Big
wide receiver names that keep popping up are Calvin Ridley and Darnell Mooney. Now, we'll talk about Chidobe Awuzie. We have already talked about CJ Gardner-Johnson. We talked a little bit about Andre Dillard, who was also reported to probably be sticking around. They're open to the idea of him sticking around. And we talked about Calvin Ridley, but I kind of want to talk about Darnell Mooney because I didn't write about this in my column over at stackingtheinbox.com this morning. I'm a little iffy on Darnell Mooney now.
Oh, really?
If you want to give me like a 1 year up to $5 million deal for Darnell Mooney, I'm in. But other than that, I mean, you can't rely on him to be your wide receiver 2, regardless of if you sign him or not. You cannot rely on him to be your wide receiver 2. You can rely on him to be your wide receiver 3, but you're going to have to pay him like a wide receiver 3. So you can't pay him Gabe Davis money thinking that he's going to be a wide receiver 2, because at the end of the day, the stats dictate, and what you see on the field, they match, right? Because everybody's been talking about the down year last year. Well, when he's targeted, because his targets went down, but when he's targeted, he's not rewarding the quarterback. So at this point, you have to understand that, okay, maybe he's not a wide receiver 2 in the NFL, but he's a wide receiver 3. And I've always kind of thought that, like, even if they sign Darnell Mooney, they still have to draft a wide receiver. But they got to sign Darnell Mooney really, really cheap. They cannot spend a 1 year up to $10 million deal. It needs to be a 1 year up to $5 million deal. So that's kind of where I am at.
I kind of like Andrew's question or his statement here. He would be the wide receiver 3. The wide receiver they draft will be wide receiver number 2. So how would that impact your feeling about Mooney if they were to sign him? Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm fine if they pay him wide receiver 3 money. I am 100% fine with Darnell Mooney.
Okay.
If they go into the draft and realizing Darnell Mooney is your wide receiver 3, as long as they realize that, I am fine with that. But there are questions. We don't really know if that's what they'll think. It's the same with Tyler Boyd for me. Tyler Boyd has to be your wide receiver 3. This whole class outside of Calvin Ridley and Gabe Davis, now that's gone, is made up of wide receiver 3s.
Yeah, I haven't
have to pay them like wide receiver 3s. That's where I'm at. And they have to be wide receiver 3 on the depth chart because you draft someone in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I've been kind of out on this wide receiver class as a whole. I have said it weeks ago on my show. I'm like, you guys think that you're going to get Mike Evans, Michael Pittman Jr., I think you're going to be disappointed because those guys are going to get snatched up, and that's what's happened so far. And now what you're left with is a bunch of guys that are probably wide receiver 3s that are going to be asking for wide receiver 2 money.
Yeah.
So I haven't watched a lot of.
Jeff Rand's asking, he says Mooney's a better athlete. I don't know who he's comparing it to, but I don't think he's a better athlete than Calvin Ridley. Was an example of wide receiver 3 money. I gave the example of up to like $5 million. So
Jake,
that's kind of where I'm. Yeah. Where are we at with cap space now after Christian Pollard signs? That's a good question, Andrew. And that's actually something I wanted to cover at the top of the show, is that we're not going to know for a while what a lot of these free agent contracts are going, what the details are. Until you see a tweet detailing, like you'll see a tweet somewhere detailing it. The initial reports, you're going to know the money, but you're not going to know the cap hits for a long time, typically in free agency. It could take up to a week. I think Bud Dupree took like a month and a half
Yeah.
at the time of his signing to get the cap hits. So we're not going to know for more than likely. I think the best piece of advice I can give you in wanting to know cap hits is that you're not going to know for a while. But as soon as I know, you guys will know. And right now, that's just not going to be out there. So I check all the time. I refresh feverishly, constantly on these sites. And I don't the first few days because there's no point. You're not going to know the cap hits for the most part unless the signings become official with the team. Because what you're hearing right now is that the Tennessee Titans have agreed to a deal. All these are agreed to deals for the most part. The deals can't become official until Wednesday. And then they have to actually come in, sign the deal. Then that's when you usually know that the cap hits are out there. The cap hit may be, for about a couple of days ahead of that time sometimes. But for the most part, until the deals become official, you normally don't see or hear the cap hits. It just, every case is a little bit different. But my rule of thumb is you're not going to know for a while. And it's very frustrating. I get that. Chidobe Awuzie is a name that's been linked to the Tennessee Titans, Cincinnati Bengals corner. I think we both really like Chidobe Awuzie, but we also all realize that they definitely need like two more corners after Chidobe Awuzie if he signs.
Man.
So where are you at on, like, at some point we have to be open to the conversation. Quinion Mitchell at 7 or in a trade back is a possibility.
Listen, we joked about that on the road home from Mobile, Alabama. Quinion Mitchell at 7. I think you can make a strong argument for him being cornerback 1 in this draft class. I like Terry and Arnold myself, but I'm not going to argue with you too much if you want to say it's Q. I love Chidobe Awuzie, and I think that, depending on how the market shakes down, could they feasibly go after, what do you think, before we get into Chidobe Awuzie? Could they feasibly go after a guy like Chidobe Awuzie and Kendall Fuller still, or Ronald Darby?
There's nothing preventing them from doing that. Yeah, there's nothing preventing them from doing that in my eyes.
I think you could get both starting corners in free agency class here, but I also really like the draft class a lot for corners too. I think there are some big long dogs in this draft class, and I know Denard Wilson's looking for dogs. With Chidobe Awuzie, I love he's got a natural fluid back pedal, change of direction. He's a good athlete. He's at his best in man coverage where he can kind of stick to guys and force tight windows at the point of the catch. I know, like, Titans fans love to hang on to the Bengals playoff game, and AJ Brown abused him a little bit in that game. I think he does tend to bite on flares when, like, wide receivers, or if they're running a post route, they'll flare outside a little bit before cutting in, or flare in before breaking out. I felt like AJ Brown was really good at that, is still really good about that. I'm talking like he died or something, but I think Chidobe Awuzie bit on those several times. There was one instance that he bit on one and he ended up on the fucking ground as AJ Brown was streaking by him. I get that. He works himself out of position sometimes. He's not the most sound tackler, but he's instinctive, he's decisive, and he's willing. I love Chidobe Awuzie. I feel like, the thought, I can't remember who tweeted it, and so I apologize for not giving proper credit, but I saw somebody tweet that the Titans kind of want a polished veteran presence in the cornerback room that is going to set the tone and practice as a professional. And I think Chidobe Awuzie can be that guy. I've liked him ever since his draft class. I actually wanted the Titans, to draft him instead of Adoree Jackson back in 2017.
I was a Tre'Davious White guy over Adoree Jackson. Either way, they could have had him if they hadn't drafted Adoree Jackson.
Yeah.
That's going to do it with us. But I know, Stoney, that every time I try to close out a show, you're already like, one more thing, or wait. So do you have anything before I close out this show?
I really like this linebacker out of Houston, David. I don't know his last name. He's number 12, but the way that they use their linebackers and edge rushers at Houston just fascinates me. I've been watching their tape over the weekend, and they're interchangeable between middle linebacker and edge rusher out wide rushing. And I think he's going to be a good value add for the Titans. So go watch the Houston Cougars all 22 when you get the chance.
I like it. Titans in line to hire Zach Woodfin as director of sports performance. I have no idea who Zach Woodfin is, other than he spells his first name wrong. ZAC is how losers spell it. ZACH is the only proper way to spell Zach.
Very well.
But Zach Woodfin, he used hashtag Miz, M-I-Z, so I'm assuming maybe he means Missouri, or maybe this guy trained Mike the Miz Mizanin.
Could be.
Let's see. Woodfin has been director of athletic performance at Missouri, so he should have used MIZZOU since 2019, and was Football Scoop's 2014 National Strength and Conditioning coach. So, just want to say this. So, since 2019, he's been in Missouri. Chris Abrams-Drain, Darius Robinson, Ennis Rakestrom. He has a pretty good connection to some of those Missouri. Tyron Hopper?
I was about to say, they got a good linebacker down there too.
Let's see. He began his career as volunteer assistant in Alabama and UAB before 4 years at Athletes Performance in Los Angeles, where he worked with athletes from all 4 major American sports leagues, as well as Olympians. Woodfin played linebacker at UAB and spent time with the Packers, Saints, Ravens, and Texans. He played only in 1 NFL game. Nothing about the injury history that I can see, so you'd have to do some research on the injury history at Missouri. But this is over at paulkarski.com. Other than that, that will do it for us. Thank you to Sinkers Beverages. Thank you to all you guys. Thank you to Kingston Group, BuildKG.com, Sinkers Beverages, locally owned businesses. We're a locally owned podcast. So we like to keep it in-house, in the family. We're very incestual that way. So Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, they'll drink so you can drive. And then the Kingston Group, BuildKG.com. Wait a minute. they'll drive so you can drink. Then the Kingston Group, BuildKG.com for your home remodeling repair needs. That will do it for us. On Thursday, it'll be Easton Freeze. Will be in the co-host chair with me while Braden is somewhere. I don't know where.
I can't wait.
And hopefully the unknown has not gotten him. But other than that, this has been a football show.